Hey guys, this is Justin at the Survivor Review. I continue my look at the movies that introduced us to the monsters we'll soon be seeing in Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Today I'm going to be talking about the 1961 classic, Mothra. So not only does this movie introduce us to Mothra, who'd go on to become like the second most popular kaiju monster next to Godzilla, but this movie also signals a shift in tone that the monster movies were taking in this era, which is that they're becoming more lighthearted and more aimed towards kids, and more fun, because that's basically what this movie is. It's a lot more lighthearted than what came before. It's like, especially compared to the first Godzilla, but even compared to Rodan, you know, it's a lot more silly compared to that. Like, the characters are more goofy, and even with the character of Mothra, who is not a bad guy. Like, if you've seen the later Godzilla films, you know that she's never been a bad guy in these movies, and even in her own solo movie, she's not the bad guy. We actually have a human villain in this movie that we have to deal with, and Mothra is the result of that, basically, because the plot of this movie begins with this ship that's caught up in this terrible typhoon, and survivors end up being stranded on this island known as Infant Island. At least in later films it'll become known as that in the US cut of this film. After rescuing the men, Japan teams up with this country named Rolisica, and they both go on this scientific expedition to the island. And when they get there, they come across these natives, and also come across these two little, like, toy-sized girls who are twins, and there's this businessman named Nelson who decides to take them, to bring them back to Japan, and to show them off and basically make a whole show out of it, making a lot of money. So there's this group of reporters and this scientist who are basically our heroes, and they want to stop Nelson, they want to return the girls to their island, you know, but the girls are okay, they're not as worried because they're like, oh, it's okay, because Mothra's gonna come save us. So we're good. And everyone's like, what? Cut to this giant egg hatching, revealing this larva creature known as Mothra, who swims to Japan and basically wreaks havoc trying to find the girls, and also at one point cocoons herself, and out comes the fully formed Mothra, who flies around destroying the city, trying to find those little girls and save them. There's a lot of plot similarities to King Kong in this movie. It almost kind of feels like Japan's version of King Kong, which I found to be really cool. I found it to be very unique. Of course, you have, like, you know, the people going to the mysterious uninhabited island, seeing all the natives and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of, like, parallels with that, which I really like. In fact, I feel like this kind of did the island and native things better than King Kong vs. Godzilla actually did, which I find kind of funny. And the cast of characters in this movie are really solid. Again, kind of like typical Toho monster movies, they aren't the most well-developed or the most exciting, but they do have, like, interesting, like, character quirks to them that make them a little bit more memorable. Of course, you got the main reporter character who's very silly. A lot of his scenes are played for laughs. And he's really kind of like the goofy comedic guy, which also kind of lends to the less serious tone that this movie has. You also have, playing the scientist, Hiroshi Kozumi, who is an actor I really associate with these films. Like, I remember seeing a lot of him in these Godzilla movies when I was a kid. So whenever I see him pop up in one of these, it just makes me smile. It's like, oh yeah, it's that guy. He's good as the main lead scientist character. But nothing beats the villain in this movie. The character of Nelson, who, my god, just by looking at him, you could tell he's the bad guy. Like, it's not subtle, he's not trying to do anything, like, unique with the part. He's just playing the smarmy, evil, you know, businessman bad guy, and he's great. Like, he's so entertaining in, like, every scene he's in. Like I said, just looking at him, we're like, oh god, this is a bad guy, right? Like, it's so obvious. And I love him. He's easily my favorite character in the film. Like, he steals the show. He's just very entertaining. He's the kind of villain you love to hate. I like how the actions of Mothra are directly tied to the human characters, which you don't normally see in these kinds of movies, because Nelson and his goons have the two twin fairies basically held against their will, and they're running away, like, hiding and everything, and now the humans are trying to find them so they can get the fairies and get them to Mothra before Mothra completely destroys the city. So I like that, like, aspect of, like, connecting the humans' actions with Mothra. And even though story-wise there isn't as much depth to the story compared to like the original Godzilla, of course, there's still some little bit to it. Of course, the fictional country known as Rolithica is meant to be kind of a parallel to America and Russia. It's kind of a mixture of that, and those characters are kind of greedy and all that kind of stuff. So there's a little bit of parallels to that, a little bit kind of themes going there. It doesn't hit you over the head with it, but there's some of it there. It's not just pure spectacle. But that being said, like, the spectacle of this movie is really good. On a technical level, this movie is really good. There are some effects, some composited shots that don't quite work very well, or some obvious moments with the main heroes picking up the little girls, and they're obviously just, you know, little figurines kind of like moving. But aside from that, like I said, like the sets look really great, some really good big stuff there, and Mothra is really good. When Mothra's in the larva state, and like she's getting on land and stuff like that and walking through the town, that has to be some of like the biggest miniatures that Toho has done. There's these like aerial shots like from high up looking down on her, and the sets look huge, and it's insane the amount of work they would put into that. And I love that stuff. Like, you'd think that'd be kind of the boring stuff of just the larva Mothra kind of walking around, which is that's all it really does. You know, but that stuff was spectacular to look at, just to see like the amount of detail and how big the miniatures were for that. And then you get to the end when Mothra hatches and is flying around and is kind of just doing a lot of Rodan stuff, just flying around so fast that's causing everything, you know, to fly and stuff like that. And that stuff's fun to watch. Like, it's just crazy. You see like all the cars just flying and going nuts. There's a couple of shots I really like which are from like inside like a miniature store, and you see cars like smashing through the windows. I thought those are very unique shots. I love those ones. This movie is again directed by Ishiro Honda. He directed a lot of the early era Showa films, and he does a great job with this. He has a good eye for this kind of stuff. He handles these scenes very well and make them very effective and like really entertaining. Like I said, the stuff with Mothra flying around at the end is very entertaining. Just classic old school monster stuff, and it's great. Mothra herself is a really cool character, mainly because for the most part it's not a guy in a suit. It is when she's in the larva states. They had a couple guys in suits there, including Haru Nakajima, which is interesting, kind of crazy. But once it becomes the actual like full form of Mothra flying around, it's not a guy in a suit, and that's a lot more unique, especially in comparison to other monsters, where it's a lot kind of the same stuff with a guy in a suit running around. Like, even in its larva state, it's unique and different, despite the fact that they don't do as much and doesn't have as many abilities. Like, I don't know, I still think Mothra is a really cool looking monster. Even though this one is a classic, and if you're a fan of these type of films, it's definitely worth checking out. I do kind of feel that, like, kind of similar to Rodan, Mothra works better in other movies with other characters, just because I feel like she's given more to do. You know, with this one, like, basically Mothra's whole role in the movie is that, like, she swims to shore, kind of walks around destroying stuff, cocoons herself, and then, you know, bursts out, flies around, and then picks up the little girls and leaves. And that's basically all Mothra really has to do in this. And then, you know, I mean, with typical Toho movies, like, the monsters aren't the focus, it's always the human characters. So it's not like the worst thing in the world, but I feel like there's a lot more for Mothra to do in other films, and a lot more to explore, because the movie doesn't really explore too much, it kind of explain too much, you know, like the little girls and like their connection to Mothra. It doesn't delve into it too much, and I feel like the other movies did a little bit more, but that doesn't really take away from this movie too much, because like I said, it's a very entertaining, just classic Showa era film. I love the Showa era. That's really the ones I grew up with. Those are the ones that I watched the most, and were like my main introduction to Godzilla. So no matter what, I'm gonna enjoy like this era of movies, and that's also what made Rodan kind of weird in a way, because it didn't exactly feel like that. This one is straight up that, and it's entertaining as hell if you like this kind of stuff. It's really an interesting change of pace, because it's not really sci-fi and horror. It's more kind of like fantasy and more kind of like fun, because the whole storyline behind Mothra and, you know, the little twin fairies and everything is a lot less, you know, scary. It's a lot more kind of cute and everything, but I still like it. Like, it's unique. Like, that's the best thing you could say about the Toho monster movies, is that they're unique. They're not your typical like giant atomic age monsters who are just here to destroy stuff. Like, the whole storyline of Mothra is so different, and like I like that a lot. It really adds to it, and it's just really entertaining. This movie is fun. Like I said, human characters are handled better than certain Showa era films. They have a lot more personality. And just like Rodan, like I'm kind of repeating myself, I know, but like I love seeing classic actors from these films popping up in here. You have Dr. Yamane from the original Godzilla playing like the head of the newspaper company. I love seeing him, you know, that was a lot of fun. And even Akihito Harada, Dr. Serizawa from the original film pops up really briefly in the first like few minutes in the movie. He doesn't have a whole lot to do. And also going back to Rodan, the main hero of that movie, Kenji Sahara, has a quick little role in here at the beginning as a helicopter pilot. So I love seeing all that stuff. The monster action, although not as much of it and not as like done seriously, is still really good. The miniatures are still fun to look at. Again, the scale of the miniatures in this movie are insane and just amazing to look at. And yeah, it just all makes for a really fun kaiju movie. Good introduction to the character of Mothra, who got like, you know, a lot more time to shine in later films, especially in the Showa era. She was kind of like a main feature in the Showa era, at least earlier on. So that's Mothra. Definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of Godzilla, a fan of these types of films. It's definitely worth it. It's very entertaining and a lot of fun. So Mothra did return in 1964, this time to finally take on the King of the Monsters himself in Mothra vs. Godzilla, which is one of the classic Showa era Godzilla films and is very entertaining, but not the one I'll be talking about next. Next one I'll be talking about is actually the follow-up to that, which came out the same year in 1964 and introduces us to the last big monster that will appear in the new upcoming Godzilla King of the Monsters. And this is a big one. So, until then, I'll talk to you guys later.